We don't need that in the picture. Hello. You have the first square today.
Yay! How are you?
Good, and yourself?
I'm okay. I'm gonna go visit my parents tonight.
Oh, very nice. You flying out?
Yeah, we're flying tonight, and we'll be seeing them tomorrow. And
They're in LA?
They're in LA. Everybody in their place has been vaccinated, but visitors are not allowed in yet to their building unless they're workmen. So I might bring my orange coveralls and drive my fake electrical car over there, and I need to do business.
Can they go out?
They can go out, yeah.
Okay.
And there are some restaurants that are open for outdoor dining, but anyway, it's going to be nice weather.
Yeah.
We'll be outside a lot.
Good, good. They enjoying it out there?
Yeah, I think so. It's hard. It's been a rough transition because they can't really socialize. And they're meeting people, but everybody's masked, so you can't really see their face. It's a little bit hard to engage socially. But my dad has, the chick magnet, that little chihuahua, so he gets a lot of conversation.
Good for him.
Yeah.
Your dad's a riot.
Yeah. And anyway, they're okay. I think they're going to be okay. They're happy.
Yeah.
And they kept in touch with some of the people that stayed in the building with them here during the freeze, and they're 20-story high rise. They had no power, no water for days, and most of the building is elderly people. I don't know. It's terrible.
It is terrible.
Which high rise was that?
Park Square.
Park Square.
Post Oak. Yeah.
No, I live in Warwick Towers. We never lost any power.
It's nice to be by the medical center.
Yes, it is. Very much so.
That's crazy. Did you guys lose water?
Didn't lose water either. I mean, we had good water pressure. Of course, we had to boil the water like everybody else, but other than that, we were fine.
The building managed not to have any frozen pipes or anything.
No frozen pipes or anything like that.
Wow.
So we were very fortunate.
My husband's office building, I guess they lost power. I don't know, but their water fountain system is completely broken, and they're just going to pull them all out.
Yeah. Well, our building prepared. They turned off the outdoor fountains that we have, and they I'm pretty sure they drained the pool and the spa. Yeah. So there were no problems. They did a good job of anticipating.
That is nice.
How's Phyllis doing? All right.
Phyllis is doing well, thank you. Just just the usual ongoing issues, but she's doing okay. She's walking better each day, and so we're thankful for that.
Hey, Bob.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Excellent.
Starting to fill in.
Hey, Cantor, I wanted to say that Ella is taking a class in anti-Semitism at her college, and they covered the Dreyfus case at the same time you did.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you're coordinating your curriculum with with them.
Did it enable any kind of interesting conversations?
Yeah, she pointed out the same thing that you did, that the Dreyfus case really motivated Herzl, to move along. But she also said that we were talking about the laws in France currently about religious assimilation, or not allowing religious dress in schools and public spaces.
Mhm.
And she said that that was also an outcome of the Dreyfus case, that France, up until Dreyfus, the Roman Catholic Church was still deeply embedded in the government, and they were not so clear on separating church and state. But after Dreyfus, they made a hard
Interesting.
separation.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, in the program I'm taking at Spertus, there's 2 classes on the history of anti-Semitism I have to take, so it should be interesting to see. Looking forward to that, to see how I can supplement. And the good news is I got a good framework to work with.
Yeah. Did you write this curriculum?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
I bought about 30 or 35 books, and I just sat and read for a year and then wrote the materials.
Very
Martin,
impressive.
welcome back, Martin. Sunday, I started to teach this class on Sunday, and my internet went out. Apparently there was a guy working in the backyard, and he just shut me off. It took me a day and a half to get them to come back out and put the internet back. So,
Terrible.
yeah, life is tough. We're a lot spoiled. But
look, life is not possible without the internet, as we know.
Yep, that's exactly the case. It's weird. So I do apologize. I've got a bit of a cold, and so I'm drinking a lot, and there may be certain complications that require me to step out of the room for a minute. So bear with me if that's the case. We'll go from there. Glad everybody is here. Small group, good. That just means opportunity to share ideas and bring in some thoughts. All right. So we are talking about war within a war. We're up to World War I. That's our time frame here. And I got through 1 page on Sunday. I'm going to start over. Here we go. So World War I, as well you know, is not sparked by any kind of Jewish conspiracy, but rather an assassination in Sarajevo. And on June 28th of 1914, a Bosnian Serb who belonged to an extremist group kills Archduke Ferdinand. We all learned this in high school, the heir to the throne of Austria-Hungary, an empire which controlled much of Central Europe. And months later, what you find is an entire world engulfed in a war of 4 years that basically covers 3 continents and involves 30 nations. You have the Central Powers, Austria-Hungary, Germany, and the Ottoman Empire, basically, and their supporters on one side. You've got the allies, Serbia, Russia, France, and Britain on the other side. And more than 19 million people die in this war. Half of them, by the way, civilians. When such a war occurs, one of the things that occurs is that the enemies are not just those without, but people begin to search within as well. There are enemies real and imagined within one's own borders. In the Ottoman Empire, those primarily focused on were the Christian Armenians. In Eastern Europe, particularly Russia, it's the Jews who are the focus of the attacks. And nonetheless, with the outbreak of the war, almost immediately Jews enlist in the Russian army. All right, and so they've rushed to defend the country. But nonetheless, despite the fact that 300,000 Jews fought in the Russian army, they were seen as disloyal and suspected of being pro-German. Early in the war, Russia wins control of much of the Austrian province of Galicia. But as the war progresses, the Germans start to take over that land. And by October of 1914, the Germans controlled the northwestern part of Russian Poland and parts of Lithuania and the Ukraine. So what you've got is the Russians retreating from lands that they had conquered, but as they do, they set fire to homes, to farms, and to businesses. And the result is that millions of people, Jews and Christians alike, are left homeless. During the war, a Jewish playwright and journalist who called himself S. Ansky traveled throughout the shtetls that dotted the Pale of Settlement and Russian-controlled Galicia, and he reported, and Karen, since you've got square one, reading number one is all yours.
All right. At first, the slanderers did their work quietly and furtively, but soon they took off their masks and accused the Jews openly. From the generals down to the lowest ensign, the officers knew how the Tsar, his family, the general staff, and the commanders felt about Jews, and so they worked to outdo one another in their anti-Semitism. The conscripts were less negative, but hearing the venom of their superiors and reading about Jewish treason day after day, they too came to suspect and hate Jews. Every commander and every colonel who made a mistake and had found a way to justify his crime, his incompetence, his carelessness, he could make everything kosher by blaming his failures on a Jewish spy. The officers, who accepted lies against Jews without question or investigation, were quick to settle accounts with the accused. The persecution reached mammoth proportions. When the Russian army passed through many towns and villages, especially when there were Cossacks, bloody pogroms took place. The soldiers torched and demolished whole neighborhoods, looted the Jewish homes and shops, killed dozens of people for no reason, took revenge on the rest, inflicted the worst humiliation on them, raped women, injured children. A Russian officer talking about seeing Cossacks playing with a Jewish 2-year-old, one of them tossed the child aloft and the other caught him on their swords. After that, it was easy to believe the German newspapers when they wrote that the Cossacks hacked off people's arms and legs and buried victims alive.
Okay. By late summer of 1915, the Russian army had uprooted more than 600,000 Jews. A non-Jewish deputy in Russia's parliament described their removal from the province of Radom, and David, you've got reading number two.
The entire population was driven out within a few hours during the night. Old men, invalids, and paralytics had to be carried in people's arms because there were no vehicles. The police treated the Jewish refugees precisely like criminals. At one station, for instance, the Jewish Commission of Hamel was not even allowed to approach the trains to render aid to the refugees or to give them food and water. In one case, a train which was conveying the victims was completely sealed, and when finally opened, most of the inmates were found half dead, 16 down with scarlet fever and one with typhus.
Soldiers who toss toddlers up and catch them on their swords, police officers who force old men, invalids, and paralytics from their homes are not protecting their country from treason. They're seeing Jews as a stereotype, not as human beings. The Russian ministers who see evidence everywhere of an international Jewish conspiracy are not alone. A number of British, French, German, and Austrian and other European officials also routinely exaggerated the power of Jews, particularly American Jews. Now, throughout 1915 and 1916, the U.S. did not take sides in the war, despite the efforts of the Allies and the Central Powers to win American support. Both of these two at war believed that American Jews had the power to tip the decision of America to one side or the other. Now, why they were so convinced that this penniless group of Jews who had just come to America had such influence is truly unbelievable. But that is based on, in part, old myths that Jews controlled the world's wealth. All right, and that's where the power lies. It was also influenced by the vigor with which Jews tended to defend one another. Every time a group of Jews protested an injustice or helped a poverty-stricken Jewish community, some saw this as an international conspiracy. So organizations like Federation in today's world would be seen by this group as proof that there's a Jewish conspiracy. The Ottoman Empire, which controlled Palestine and other parts of the Middle East, was obviously one of the central powers. Early in the war, the Ottoman governor of Palestine feared that Jewish nationalists were going to side with the Allies, and so he arrested a good number of them and banished about 6,000 of the 85,000 Jewish settlers in the province. Many of them found refuge in the British-controlled Egypt. Almost everyone who was banished, however, was a Russian Jew, because in their view, all Russian Jews were the enemy aliens, even though the Jews considered themselves refugees from Russian persecution. They fled Russia because of the persecution and now are being accused of being pro-Russia. He orders all their newspapers, their schools, banks, political offices closed. When David Ben-Gurion and other Zionist leaders protest, they too are exiled. Excuse me. This policy persuades Zionists and Arab nationalists to help the Allies. In 1916, the British offered to aid the Hashemites, the Palestinians of the land, a powerful Arab family, in creating an independent Arab kingdom in exchange for military support by the Arabs. The Zionists were obviously interested in a similar arrangement. They wanted the British to recognize the rights of the Jewish people in Palestine. And to show their commitment to the Allies, a group of young Jews organized a Jewish legion that fights on behalf of the British. On November 2nd, 1917, Arthur James Balfour, the British Foreign Secretary, issues a declaration that states, in part, His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object. To anti-Semites who hear this statement, the Balfour Declaration was proof that the Jews controlled Britain. To Balfour and other government leaders, it simply was a rational decision that they believed would result in strong support for the Allies. They were courting American Jewish dollars. This had an impact on the Central Powers as well. They viewed the Jews as a united group, and therefore they saw the Balfour Declaration as a powerful piece of propaganda for the Allies. And they believed that it would prompt Jewish bankers to lend more money to the Allies. So to optimize the effects of the declaration, the Ottoman officials end restrictions, many of the restrictions of Jewish immigration to Palestine. They're trying to court the Jewish American dollar as well. All right, get your walking shoes on. We're going to Russia. November 1917. A second revolution is underway in Russia. Not only had the Tsar been overthrown, but now Russia's first democratic government had been replaced as well. Russia's newest government, led by the Communist Party, known as the Bolsheviks, officially withdrew from the war, and they signed a peace treaty with the Germans. Thanks to that treaty, the Germans are able to transfer thousands of soldiers from the Eastern Front to the battlefields in the West. There they, however, face a new opponent because the United States in April of 1917 joins the Allies and declares war. By the fall of 17, American troops were helping the Allies push the Germans back, and it wasn't long until Germany surrendered and the war was finally over. As World War I now is coming to an end, Jewish civilians in Eastern Europe found that the dangers that they had experienced are intensifying rather than diminishing. Russia, Austria-Hungary, Ottoman Empire were beginning to break apart. And what you've got is dozens of ethnic groups vying for power and independence. Revolutions and civil wars break out almost everywhere, and Jews find themselves caught in the middle. Lenin, the leader of the Bolsheviks, while agreeing with most of Marx's ideas, quickly realizes that the real world doesn't always match Marxist theories. And almost as soon as the communists take power, they find themselves at war with the Tsar's army, with the White Army, which was made up of Russians who hoped to restore the deposed Tsar. The Bolsheviks, you've got the White Army, the Tsar's army, you've got the Red Army, the Bolsheviks, the communists, but they also faced opposition from nationalist groups who wanted their own independent countries. And as a result, in some parts of the old Russian Empire, nobody was in control. It was utter chaos. And so the situation was particularly difficult and dangerous in the Ukraine, where the Pale of Settlement is to be found. Like other ethnic groups in old Russian Empire, the Ukrainians wanted their own independence. And as a result, the Red Army that was in Ukraine faced not only the White Army, but also gangs of bandits and thugs into this newly organized Ukrainian army. These Ukrainian armies all targeted Jews because they believed that all the Jews were supporters of the communists, of the Red Army. Everybody sees the Jews on the other side somehow. All right, to them, all Jews were communists and all communists were Jews because Karl Marx was a Jew. Therefore, it's obvious. About 60 pogroms against the Jews take place in the Ukraine in November and December in 2017, and those attacks continue for another 2 years. The White Army also participated in pogroms in the territories under its own control, and by the late summer of 1919, these forces had taken the lead in attacking Jews. What a great battle. Who can kill more Jews? It's wonderful. John Ernest Hodgson, a British journalist who traveled with the White House Army, explained why. Reading number 3. Bob, you've got the third square.
Okay. The officers and the men of the army laid practically all the blame for their country's troubles on the Hebrew. They held that the whole catastrophe had been engineered by some great and mysterious secret society of international Jews, who in the pay and at the orders of Germany had seized the psychological moment and snatched the reins of government.
These ideas, with the exception of the influence of Germany, come straight out of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. The protocols had disappeared for the period of the war, but the brutal murder of Tsar Nicholas II and his wife Alexandria at the hands of the Bolsheviks turned new attention to the document. A week after the murder, White Army soldiers found a copy of the protocols among Alexandra's possessions. They now imagined that the book was a sign from Alexandra that the White Army was engaged in an epic battle against the Red Army controlled by the Jews. All it took was the finding of a book. Historians have found letters suggesting that Alexandra's copy of the protocols was probably not a treasured possession, but rather a gift she received before she was taken into custody. The fact that Tsarina had owned a copy of the protocols, however, spread quickly throughout the White Army. And before long, officers and soldiers were convinced that the fact that she carried the book with her was proof that they were true. The facts were true. Most of the men probably believed it was true because it seemed to provide an explanation for the terrible things that happened to Russia over the past 10 years. This has been a horrible period in Russian time. Got a solution as to why? Statistics reveal that as a result of that fierce and unreasoned hatred, more than 2,000 pogroms took place in Eastern Europe between 1917 and 1921. About 75,000 Jews are killed, many more are injured, and at least 500,000 are left homeless. Many of us know stories about this from our own ancestors who fled during this time. I certainly have. My great grandmother used to tell stories of the events. All right, a swift change over to the Ottoman Empire. The British and the French divided up the old Ottoman Empire, ignoring the promises that they made to the Arabs and the Zionists during the war. The British now control Palestine and Iraq. The French rule Syria and Lebanon. The Zionists made one important gain in this process, and that was the text of the Balfour Declaration. It was included in the mandate that the League of Nations gave to Britain and Palestine over Arab objections. The League defined a mandate as a territory held in trust by a European nation until that nation would be given the territory, would be given independence. So that was one of the gains. Nonetheless, in all over Europe, anti-Semitism is alive and well in this period. Poland, newly formed Poland, where some 3.5 million Jews still lived, Jews soon learned that they had merely passed from one kind of oppression to another. In their revived nationalist fervor, the Poles looked on unassimilated Jews as strangers and proceeded to squeeze them out of the national economy. 200,000 Romanian Jews, former immigrants, were denationalized. Jewish education and welfare activities were disallowed. Nativist groups attacked Romanian Jews everywhere with the complicity of the police. Post-war developments in Hungary were fateful for Jews of all provinces. This battered country fell into the clutches of the Red dictatorship in 1918 under Bela Kun, a Jew, who brought other Jews into his cabinet. So it's a Russian takeover by a Jewish leader. When the regime falls in 1919, a white terror under Admiral Horthy replaces it, and the Jews suffer again. They are not allowed to forget that Kuhn was a Jew by birth, and anti-Semites missed no opportunity to be in the ear of the populace that Bolshevism was a Jewish invention. In 1919, some 5,000 Jews were slain in riots and massacres, and many more occurred, and many more were injured, while thousands were humiliated and ostracized in process. Excuse me. With the communist takeover, the White Russians fled the Soviet Union. In process, they took the protocols of the Elders of Zion all over with them. To many of them, and to a growing number of people in other countries, the protocols seem to explain the losses and anxieties of the modern world post-World War I. August 1921. The London Times exposes the protocols as a fraud. The newspaper showed how the original author of the document had copied fictional works to create the protocol. One of those works was an 1868 novel by Hermann Goethe, a German anti-Semite. That's Goedeshe. The novel contained a chapter describing a secret meeting of the Elders of Zion at midnight in the oldest cemetery in Prague. In this fictional chapter, as the men gather to plot the enslavement of non-Jews, there are two Christians who are hiding among the tombstones, and they overhear what's going on. One of them summarizes how the Jews intend to undermine Christian nations, and Marcia, you've got square number 4.
Okay, Henry Morgenthau, Jewish U.S. That one, yeah.
No, it should say to concentrate in their.
Number 4.
I may have skipped the reading. It says reading 5 to concentrate.
Yeah, okay.
Let's skip the
Herman,
meeting.
whatever, Goethe, 1868. To
Yeah.
concentrate in their hands all the capital of the nations of all lands. To secure possession of the land, railroads, mines, houses. To be at the head of all organizations, to occupy the highest government posts. To paralyze commerce and industry everywhere. To seize the press, to direct legislation, public opinion, and national movements. And all for the purpose of subjugating all nations on earth to their power.
So this was a fictional work that is borrowed by the Russians who create the protocols. As a result of the Times expose, the publishing company stopped producing the protocols, and many newspapers no longer gave it publicity. But neither of those activities hurt its popularity. A group known only as the Britons now published its own edition, and the preface claimed that the Times expose proved nothing. All right, Rona, you have reading 6.
Can't hear you.
No, I'm now, okay? Of
Yep.
course, Jews say the protocols are a forgery, but the Great War was no forgery. The fate of Russia is no forgery. And these were predicted by the learned elders as long ago as 1901. The Great War was no German war, it was a Jew war. It was plotted by Jews and was waged by Jewry on the stock exchanges of the world. The generals and admirals were all controlled by Jewry.
By 1922, translations of the protocols also appeared in Germany, in France, and in Poland. The Poland edition appeared at a time when many Poles, including leaders of the Roman Catholic Church in Poland, believed that the nation was about to be attacked by the Red Army. 2 cardinals, 2 archbishops, and 3 bishops, all influenced by the protocols, sent out a cry for help that was read in churches around the world. It read in part, "The real object of Bolshevism is world conquest. The race which has the leadership of Bolshevism in its hands had already in the past subjugated the whole world by means of gold and the banks, and now, driven by everlasting imperialistic greed which flows in its veins, is already aiming at the final subjugation of the nations under the yoke of its rule." Translation spread further. Denmark, Finland, Greece, Hungary, Italy, Romania, Spain, and South America. All right. White Russians, exiles in Siberia, carry it to Japan. And almost everywhere, the false statements contained in the book seeped into the general culture. Exposés of the forgery seemed to make little difference. After all, who could deny the wars, the revolutions, and the economic disasters that had taken place in the first 2 decades of the century? All had supposedly been prophesized in the protocols. I'm going to jump ahead. I want to read through some of the protocol material. I think it's at the end of your readings, and we'll come back to the earlier ones. Martin, Judith, and Cynthia, if you would, I'm just going to step out for a second. You'll just read a section each and keep going. And then Karen and David, I'll be right back. Just read through that and the protocols there.
Here goes. A fundamental belief of anti-Semites is that Jews have formed a secret government that is, at this very moment, conspiring to dominate the world. To support this bizarre assertion, anti-Semites cite the protocols of the learned elders of Zion. Quote, "The canonical text in the history of conspiracy theory," unquote, which was forged by the Tsar's secret police in Paris. The forger concocted a tale of an alleged meeting of Jewish elders in an ancient Jewish cemetery of Prague, where in those eerie surroundings, they plotted to take over the world. After World War I, the work was taken very seriously, even by public figures, as it had been in 1905 by Tsar and the Kaiser, for it, quote, "satisfied a deep emotional need in the post-war world providing a simple, all-embracing explanation for a bewildering series of events. The fall of dynasties, the decline of aristocracy, bloody wars, national humiliation, the emergence of international communism, worthless currencies, the weakening hold of traditional religion, pornography, the new woman, jazz, and a host of other unsettling trends were, each and every one, to be accounted for as parts of a well of thought-out Jewish plan. In various versions of the protocols excerpted below, the anonymous narrator is reportedly the chief rabbi, Satan, or Theodore Herzl.
Interesting parallels, right? There you go. All right.
Next reader. Who wants to
Yes.
be next?
All right, Judith, you've got protocol 1.
Okay, before I read it, when was this anti-Semitism in the modern world written?
I've got it on my shelf. Let me find it for you. Hold on
Okay.
1 second. Keep going.
From protocol number 1, the political has nothing in common with the moral. The ruler who is governed by the moral is not a skilled politician and is therefore unstable on his throne. He who wishes to rule must have recourse both to cunning and to make-believe. Great national qualities like frankness and honesty are vices in politics. I loved that one. For they bring down rulers from their thrones more effectively and more certainly than the most powerful enemy. Such qualities must be the attributes of the kingdoms of the Goyim, but we must in now wise be guided by them. For the sake of victory, we must keep to the program of violence and deception. The doctrine of vengeance is precisely the means by which we shall triumph and bring all governments into subjection to our super government. It is enough for them to know that we are merciless, for all disobedience will then cease.
Okay.
You want me to go?
Yes, take protocol 2 and 3.
Okay. The administrators whom we shall choose from among the public with strict regard to their capacities for service obedience will not be persons trained in the arts of government and will therefore easily become pawns in our game in the hands of men of learning and genius who will be their advisors, specialists bred and reared from early childhood to rule the affairs of the whole world. Protocol 3, we appear on the scene as alleged saviors of the worker from this oppression, poverty, which we propose to him to enter the ranks of our fighting forces, socials, anarchists, communists, to whom we always give support in accordance with an alleged brotherly rule of our social masonry. The aristocracy, which enjoyed by law the labor of the workers, was interested in seeing that the workers were well-fed, healthy, and strong. We are interested in just the opposite, in the diminution, what is that, diminution? Diminution, okay. The keeping out of Goyim. Our power is in the chronic shortness of food and physical weakness of the worker, because by all that this implies, he is made the slave of our will, and he will not find in his own authorities either strength or energy to set against our will. Hunger creates the right of capital to rule the workers.
The book, The Modern World, was published in 2019. Okay, Karen, continue on with 5.
For a time, perhaps, we might be successfully dealt with by a collation of the Goyim of all the world. But from this danger, we are secured by the discord existing among them, whose roots are so deeply seated that they can never now be plucked up. We have set one against another the personal and national reckonings of the Goyim, religious and race hatreds, which we have fostered into a huge growth in the course of the past 20 centuries. We are too strong. There is no evading our power. The nations cannot come to even an inconsiderable private agreement without our secretly having a hand in it. And it was said by the prophets that we were chosen by God himself to rule the whole earth. God has endowed us with a genius that we may be equal to our task. All the machinery of all states go by the force of the engine, which is in our hands, and that engine of the machinery of the states is gold. The science of political economy was invented by our learned elders.
All right, David, you've got number 9 and 11, and then Bob, you'll take 12 and 14.
For us, there are no checks to limit the range of our activity. Our super government subsists in extra-legal conditions, which are described rightly by the energetic and forcible word dictatorship. I am in a position to tell you with a clear conscience that at the proper time, we, the lawgivers, shall execute judgment and sentence. We shall slay and we shall spare. We, as head of all our troops, are mounted on the steed of the leader. We rule by force of will, because in our hands are the fragments of a once powerful part, the liberals, now vanquished by us. And the weapons in our hands are a limitless ambition, burning greediness, merciless vengeance, hatreds and malice. And number 11, the Goyim are a flock of sheep, and we are their wolves. And you know what happens when the wolves get hold of the flock. God has granted to us, his chosen people, the gift of the dispersion, and in this, which appears in all eyes of our weakness, has come forth all our strength, which has now brought us to the threshold of sovereignty over all the world.
Thank you.
Protocol 12. Literature and journalism are two of the most important educative forces, and therefore our government will become proprietor of the majority of the journals. This will put us in possession of a tremendous influence upon the public mind, thereby creating confidence in us and bringing over to us quite unsuspicious opponents, who will thus fall into our trap and be rendered harmless. Protocol 14. When we come into our kingdom, it will be undesirable for us that there should exist any other religion that ours of the one God, with whom our destiny is bound up by our position as the chosen people, and through whom our same destiny is united with the destinies of the world. We must therefore destroy all other religions.
So I thought, even though this is a long reading, it's important that we all hear about the protocols. It's important to get a sense of what's really in them, what is really being said. You know, I don't know about you, but I don't know where this perceived power is. As Jews, I often feel completely powerless. I'll take any responses to it as well. Yeah, Marcia.
Yeah, a couple of things struck me. One is, of course, the chosen people idea, which appears in several of the protocols. In protocol number 3, I was struck by something interesting where in the 4th line, they talk about with an alleged brotherly rule of our social masonry. I think they mean the Freemasons, who are always, criticized by, Catholicism in particular, for being conspirators. So it's interesting here that they're allied with the Jews. And then in protocol 12, the idea of controlling information is very, very interesting.
Yeah, why would Jews go to Hollywood?
Yeah, to control. Yeah.
All right, Judith.
Yeah, along those lines, I was kind of taken aback by protocol 2, where it says specialists bred and reared from early childhood to rule the affairs of the whole world. Now, I know this was before the 1930s Germany, but that's what Hitler was trying to do, from youth, to raise children who would run the world.
Well, you're right, but he was doing it because the Jews had done it, quote unquote, and therefore he had to respond to such.
But just that idea. And one other comment on what, I'm sorry, I didn't get the woman's name, but the last woman said, I can't remember which protocol it was, but again, I would refer people to Tulushkin's Jewish literacy, where he writes about the protocols.
Yeah.
And he has some comments on some of the ideas.
Tulushkin's always a good place to go. Martin, did you have something to say?
Yeah, so it sounds like so much hogwash. I mean, it's unbelievable what nonsense this is. It makes me think of QAnon, right? As we all know, today, Trump returns as president. This is about as far-fetched.
Yeah, well, I'm going to try to avoid the politic, but yes, the technique is the same, for sure. Yes, Bob.
Yet there is a kernel of truth. You look at one of the biggest banking families in Europe, the Rothschilds. They exerted considerable power throughout their time.
They did, but if you remember, we talked about every time they tried to influence, there's still a limitation. Some of them weren't allowed to live in homes in the community. They were in hotels, as we read. Yes, but again, what were the Jews limited to do in their occupations? And a lot of it was lending. All right.
And plus, I mean, the Rothschilds weren't the only people managing money in Europe.
That's
I
right.
mean, it's not like they controlled all the money in Europe.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, but now the Rothschilds have lasers, you know.
Oh, those space lasers are the way we're going to do it finally.
All right. So we're going to,
you know, they seize upon that half truth to make their case.
Right, and look, most stereotypes have some seed of something. It comes from somewhere. It's just blown out of proportion or misinformed in how it's understood.
Well, even the concept of the chosen people. I mean, yeah, that appears in you know, prayers and other things, but it's not. We don't think of it the same way that they're. You know, it's distorted here.
It is distorted. But look, you know, at the same time, I would say to you, Christianity also believes that they are chosen and they're the only ones with the right answer. That's not an uncommon religious understanding. All right. So it's a particularly difficult one. Yeah. All right. Now
I don't know if anybody in this group has any expertise in this, but I read stuff like this and I read about QAnon and other conspiracy theories. And to me, there must be a psychiatrist or neurologist somewhere who could do a brain mapping and show how human beings create these fictions in our heads and accept them. This is so familiar, all of this stuff.
There have been lots of studies done. A lot of it has to do with agreeing with the people you are around, like sort of like peer pressure. And
but no, not just the group think, but the structure of the conspiracy. You know, that there's one hidden leadership, and it's all, the whole world is involved. It all seems so, I don't know.
Well, again,
it's a strong pattern.
It even mentions it somewhere in the first 3 pages of our outline, and it's been mentioned before. People people find something to blame for their own misfortunes, whether it's losing a war or, you know, they can't accept, well, it's just what we did versus what they did. Mm-hmm. Finding a scapegoat is just a common human trait.
Yeah.
So let me suggest a particular book. I was looking, I didn't see it on my shelf. It's called They Thought They Were Free by Milton Mayer. It's a book about a psychologist who goes to Germany in the 1950s to try and understand the average German, as he calls them, 10 small people. How did they go along with this? And he analyzes their behaviors. They thought they were free. All right.
What was the author's name?
Milton Mayer, M-A-Y-E-R.
Can I just want to bring up something quickly because it's relevant. On Tuesday, I volunteer at a pantry. And the reason I'm saying that is you want to believe that you're among people who are giving and sharing and that kind of thing. I walked out on Tuesday, there was a car parked there, and the sticker on the back was a play on, you know, the coexist sticker with all the different religious symbols that spell out coexist.
Right.
Yeah.
Notice it didn't look exactly like it. And what it said, it showed all the different religious symbols. And underneath it said, there is only one true religion. and there's an underline under it, and it says John, it was quoting, and I couldn't get the verse and everything, but John, blah, 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 whatever. And I stood there and I've got to be reading this wrong. And this was just last Tuesday. I'm in Charleston, and not that it matters, but it just kind of blew me. As much, I'm not that naive, but when it smacks you in the face, you just kind of stand there and say, I'm not believing this. And
Right.
it was a car sticker.
Right. So this concept of chosen people is, you know, we're all uncomfortable with it, but most religions in some way claim they have the correct answer. And, you know, the modern concept of this coexistence is a new idea, and it's got a ways to go before it's going to be fully embraced. Let's just say that.
Right.
We as Jews can't agree on anything, never mind going with outside the realm of Jews. Judith, one last comment, and then I've got to go on.
One last comment, and that is the protocol number 1. The part you wrote was so interesting to me, talking about politicians and their frankness and their honesty being their downfall. Yep. And thinking about modern times.
Yeah, no more said. You got it. You're 100% on. All right. So now it swims across to the United States. All right. The strongest supporter of the protocols in America is Henry Ford, the manufacturer of the first affordable automobile. 1918, Henry Ford purchases his hometown newspaper, the Dearborn Independent. And a year later, he begins publishing a series of articles that claim a vast Jewish conspiracy is infecting America. The series ran in 91 consecutive issues. 91 consecutive issues. Ford takes those 91 and he binds them into a 4-volume collection titled The International Jew, and he distributes 500,000 copies of those documents through his vast network of dealerships and the subscribers. It's not a matter with Ford that it's unique in its content or scope. What it is as much as its scope, rather. What Henry Ford does, all right, is he puts it out in his dealerships. When you go to buy a car, it's sitting there. Oftentimes, the dealerships themselves would put it, when you bought a new car, it would be put on the front seat of the car that you bought.
What year are we talking about, more or less?
The early 20s.
Okay.
All right. It is all over the place. All right, for Americans, there's no way around it, and it blames everything. Strikes, it's the Jews. Financial scandals, it's the Jews. Agricultural disasters and depressions, it's the Jews. The Jews become the symbol of a world that is being manipulated and controlled. All right, and as one of the most famous men in America, he legitimizes these what might have been considered ridiculous by others. He legitimizes it. Germans at the Nuremberg trials credited Ford's International Jew as a source of their anti-Semitism. Following World War I, the poverty-stricken Germans looked to the successful Americans as models. American Jews tried very hard to show Ford that this was all a forgery, but he ignored them. And Jews, their initial response was to not buy any Ford cars. All right. I grew up hearing this about German cars, right? You don't buy a German car. Well, they responded by not buying Fords. But the American Jewish leadership didn't necessarily support the boycott. Instead, they created a public relations campaign to educate Americans about Jews and Judaism. And 119 prominent Americans, including President Woodrow Wilson and former President William Howard Taft, signed a letter in January of 1921 condemning anti-Semitism. It said, "We believe it should not be left to men and women of the Jewish faith to fight this evil, but that it's in a very special sense the duty of citizens who are not Jews by ancestry or faith." Again, this is one of the things that makes America a little bit different. All right, you see some political leaders stepping up. None of these efforts, nonetheless, affected the popularity. In 1924, the Dearborn Independent ran a series of articles attacking Aaron Shapiro, a Chicago attorney. Ford accused Shapiro of being part of a conspiracy of Jewish bankers who seek to control the food market of the world. Shapiro hires his own attorney, who files a $1 million defamation suit against Ford. All right, Ford hires a team of lawyers and an army of detectives to defend themselves. And the proceedings initially end in a mistrial after a reporter interviews one of the jurors before the case is decided. As the second trial begins to unfold, it becomes increasingly clear that Ford is going to lose. All right, he's going to lose, and because he has no proof of any of the charges that he's making. At this point, Ford reaches out to Lewis Marshall and U.S. Congressman Nathan Perlman, and he tells them that he had been wrong to attack Shapiro and other Jews and wants to make amends. The two men suggest that he make a public apology and an end to Ford's anti-Semitic campaign. Ford agrees and commissioned Lewis Marshall to write his apology. Many consider this process as the first hate speech case. Whether or not Ford really changed, he didn't, because you'll see later he doesn't. Nonetheless, his works live on. There were 5 anti-Semitic organizations in the US before 1932. And by 1948 years later, there were 120. All right. Many of them relied on the articles in the books that Ford had published in the 1920s. Among the anti-Semites who acknowledged their debt to Ford was Father Charles Coughlin, a Detroit-based Catholic priest who had an early weekly radio show. Now, we're talking early radio show. We're talking a world in which the population of America is not what it is now. He had weekly listeners, 30 million people. Rush Limbaugh would have given his life to get, anything near that. Okay. Coughlin wrote, "Yes, the Jews have always claimed that the protocols were forgeries, but I prefer the words of Henry Ford, who said, the best test of the truth of the protocols is in the fact that up to the present moment, they have been carried out." Mr. Ford did retract his accusations against the Jews, but neither Mr. Ford nor I retract the statement that many of the events predicted in the protocols have come to pass. And those predicted events included World War I, the Russian Revolution, and the Balfour Declaration. Now, the protocols don't really predict any of those in specific, but the document has sufficiently vague language that anything could be interpreted such. It's like reading your horoscope. All right, you could read anything you want into it. All right. Coughlin, as an aside, later defended the German-sponsored violence of Kristallnacht, arguing that the actions were justified as retaliation for Jewish persecution of Christians. Excuse me. Despite the latter claims to be rid of anti-Semitism by Ford, in 1939, there were signs at the Ford plants on the gates that said things to the effect of, "Jews teach communism. Jews teach atheism. Jews destroy Christianity. Jews control the press. Jews produce filthy movies. Jews control money." We've heard all of this. Right? This is what's showing up on the gates of the Ford plants. Ford continued to claim that the Jews fomented World War I so that they could profit from supplying war materials to both sides, and he blames the Jews for starting the Second World War. He says the whole thing has just been made up by Jewish bankers. Just to finish up here, I want to jump ahead a little bit in time. The protocols continue to surface in our world again and again. They fuel hatred. A century after they were written, the protocol is being peddled to an audience vaster than any of its authors could ever have imagined. It is staged in television productions for millions of viewers in the Arab world. It is sold in Europe in bookstores of the radical left and the radical right. It is circulated on the internet in practically every language that exists. It is hawked on street corners by Black Muslim followers of Farrakhan. And it is excerpted and distributed by anti-Zionists on college campuses across the country. It may not be in our face as we sit here in Houston. It is in faces all over the world. I think that's where I'm going to stop for today. I'm open to comments and thoughts. Please educate me. Judith.
Two things. Again, refer to Jewish literacy. He has a lot of information. I mean, his pieces are very short, but he has a lot of information on the protocols, and a couple of times in 74 and 58, and where they were referred to like by Nasser in 58 and King Faisal in 74 and so forth. Also, on that suit against Henry Ford, I had read that Marshall was the lawyer for the man suing for libel. He said Sapiro, is that S-A-P-I-R-O?
Mm-hmm.
And one last thing I had also read, this was like a year ago or more, I don't remember how I ended up reading about it, but Henry Ford, that Hitler read those articles that Ford, had written in the paper, and that he sent Ford for his birthday some kind of German medal. So Hitler was a fan of Henry Ford's writing.
Yeah. Yep. Anybody else? Marcia, you unmuted? No?
No, I was just stretching, sorry.
Okay, that's okay. I thought you were raising your hand.
No, listening.
At Farrakhan's height, we were in Fondren, and they would be they would be on the corners there, giving away his papers. It was pretty scary to see that at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think relations are changing now. That's a whole nother course.
But how many of us would be surprised if they started to show up on QAnon or on the far left?
Right.
None of us would be. We wouldn't be shocked. We'd be horrified, but we wouldn't be shocked.
No, we wouldn't, because this is a repetition of what's happened before.
Right.
And we don't seem to learn from history, people.
Well, we are learning from history.
Well, yes,
so we can anticipate it happening again.
Yeah, but I mean, in general, the world doesn't seem to learn from history.
Yep. When things are bad, as I think Karen said, or somebody said, you look for reasons for why this is happening, and scapegoats. Jews have always suffered when things are bad. So they become the easy scapegoat because they are the other. They are the non-Christians in a world or non-Muslims in a world of Muslims and Christians.
Go ahead.
Yeah, actually, now I have something to say. That the Henry Ford writings had to have been a big factor in the early 1920s to the closing off of Eastern European immigration in 1924.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the cart and the horse is there, but they certainly interplayed pretty well.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah.
I have a question. When you were reading off the list of what the sign said on the gates of the Ford plants,
right.
How did he come to the conclusion that Jews supported the atheist or were atheist?
Communism.
Communist.
So they were communists, so therefore they were atheists?
Yeah, well, but what define atheism? I mean, because they reject the real God.
Ah, okay.
Okay, that's so it does fit.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
they're also communists, which even though they embraced the Russian Orthodox Church early in process, they really got rid of it.
So you skipped over the reading where Henry Morgenthau was talking about I think that was about the minority law and the little Treaty of Versailles that got skipped over.
Yeah.
And it's not really about anti-Semitism per se, but through a bunch of reasons, I started listening to the book East West Street on Audible. I don't know if you've read that, Cantor, but it's a great book about the way the Nuremberg trial developed the laws of genocide and human rights, really, human rights law.
What's it called?
East West Street on the Origins of Genocide and Crimes Against Humanity by Philip Sands. And he talks a lot in here about what I like about it so far is it's kind of the story of a couple of families from the Pale and how their lives moved through history. And anyway, that's all I'll say about it. But the whole way the Treaty of Versailles created these laws about minority rights in Europe, where in America we were really focused on individual rights, I think informed the way history played out after World War II, that the American idea of individual rights became supreme. I mean, obviously the laws of minority rights in Europe collapsed because it was just a disaster. Anyway, that's all.
Right. So Karen, because you raised the question, I really would recommend the book. They thought they were free. I've used it a lot in my teachings over the years.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, my friends, have a great week. We'll see you next week and we'll keep playing.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.